Hi, this is Paul, and this is going to be the debrief for the Quest for a Spiritual Home conference that we just finished up last weekend. I'm waiting for Catherine and John Van Donk to join me in the room. Now, those of you who have already gotten into the StreamYard link, you got there from the link in the Discord server. My plan was to start with John and Catherine. John Vervaeke is traveling. I haven't heard back from Jonathan Peugeot. I just sprung this on them on Thursday. So Jonathan Peugeot might not have even seen the email. But I've got confirmation from John Van Donk and Catherine that they were going to come in. And then after I've spoken with them for a half hour, 45 minutes, my guess was that I would let some of the rest of you in the room. So you can stay in the little room in StreamYard and listen to it that way, or you can just follow it on YouTube and then jump back in when we get closer to having them on. But it's been quite interesting seeing that, in fact, the two people that said they were going to be here are not, in fact, here. And so it is just me, myself, and I guess I could bring Gage if you want to come in. Oh, there he is. Okay, we got one here. All right.
Hello, y'all.
Welcome, John. Welcome, Doug. Welcome, Harley. And here's Catherine. All right, we have Catherine. So, Doug and Harley, I'm going to put you guys back in the room, and we will see you later. There we go. Okay, here we are. Welcome. I wanted to start this conversation with some of the people that got this conference going and led it, and then we will, as we keep going, we will let more and more of the audience in to hear from the people themselves. Where shall we begin? Let's talk first about expectations for this conference before we get into analysis and retrospection. So maybe some introductions first. Catherine, John, maybe start with Catherine, because in many ways, Catherine was the genesis for a lot of this conferencing that we've done. So Catherine, maybe talk a little bit about how you got into starting these conferences, and then a little bit of Thunder Bay, and then coming into this one.
Sure. Well, that's a nice question to ask. So I completely blame my husband for the entire thing. He introduced me to a lot of the sort of central figures in these conferences. You, Paul, John, Jonathan. And so we'd been listening to them for a long time. And Eamon one day said, we got to get these guys together. Like, it's great that they're on the internet, but we need everybody in one spot. And if we can get everybody together, I think the conversations would go farther. And everybody is online. It would just be better if we could all talk in person. And I think something really good would come out of that. So then I reached out to my brother, who is the abbot of Urban Abbey in Thunder Bay. And he said he would love to do it. He'd been following the guys too. He thought it would be perfect. So then together we sat down and thought, how would we, if we get to make a conference, which normally you don't get to do, you normally go to somebody else's conference, then how would we want it to be? And what we really wanted to put in the middle is like free-flowing conversation. You know, you've seen how good that is in like Joe Rogan's format, sort of was probably the granddaddy of all these dialogues. And then on all the channels, most people really, like, Paul, you know better than me, but it seems like when it's a dialogue, you get way more people interested in what's happening than just somebody monologuing. And when I've attended conferences, my favorite thing was always kind of linger near where the speaker was talking to people and just listening to him talking to the people in the lineups.
Oh, interesting.
What if we put that right on the page, and then everybody can listen in on that conversation? So that was kind of what we tried to structure it around.
Okay, so the Thunder Bay event was delayed by 2 years because of COVID. And there was a German event that happened, the German festival, which Cassidy basically went to you and said, "Well, how are you going to do Thunder Bay?" And so we sort of had a prequel of
Mhm.
Thunder Bay in Germany, and then Thunder Bay happened. What were your takeaway, thinking about what you had planned for Thunder Bay and how it came off? What now, a number of months after that, what sort of rises to the top in terms of your reflections from that?
So I hadn't anticipated. So when I first planned it, I thought we might have at least like a 50-50 split of local people and people who traveled from far away. Um, Maybe even like a 2/3 split, more locals, because I didn't expect that many people would come. So when it ended up being more like 80-20 people who traveled from far away, I was shocked and thrilled. It was great because there's all these people I know online, and um, and the kinds of people who wanted to come was also interesting to me. It was such a diverse field of people, all different backgrounds, professions, training, stages of life. You get some folks in their 90s, and you get guys who are like 21. So you get this huge spread of people, which I wasn't expecting. Um, in and the conversation, I know we had it at this conference too. It kicks off right away. Everybody's talking. They're immediately in dialogue. One thing I hope we talk about that was different with this one was we started off with the estuary groups right away, and so that really focused things in a different way than the last conference. But still, everybody's just hungry to talk and connect. Everybody's had all these ideas, and they're ready for a in-person dialogue partner, which is different than the online thing. So that was a surprise. Usually people kind of like watch and linger and lurk, and then after maybe a day or two, they'll start talking. But that was different with these conferences. Um, in terms of content, the first conference, and this has been mentioned before, it ended up focusing almost completely around consciousness, and it didn't land in conscience. And my thought had been to try to pair it into practical, ethical, like engagement, either at a cultural level or a personal level, and we didn't really hit that half of it. Um, and I feel like we moved a little closer this time, but it still is not a um, the talks don't move in. Now, I'm a counselor, right? So I'm always like, how do you apply it? What do you do? What are practical steps that you can take? And so for me, I'm like, well, I don't feel like we've gotten that concrete yet. In that I would hope all the different speakers would have different concrete steps. And so then people could make of that what they wish. But I had thought maybe that would happen this time as well, and it hasn't. So one of my thoughts has been, maybe that's just me because of how I work with people, and and maybe that's not actually what is wanted, or maybe that's something to try to highlight in the future. Maybe I thought maybe bringing in Rafe Kelly, some of the more embodied things, and then also just being explicitly like, I read a quote a couple weeks ago. I can't even remember who it's by now, but he said something like, times will come where wisdom is stating the obvious. And I think that for a lot of people in our speaker panel, just stating the obvious, what's obvious to them is what people need to hear. Like at one point in the talk, Jonathan Pajot, I kind of poked him on this topic a little bit, and then he was like, well, there's the things you do with your family. And he went, and these are all the things I do with my family. I was like, that's it. That's exactly what people need. He feels like he's just saying the obvious, but that's the kind of how does it work out in your life that people often have a hard time knowing how to move into. So we got a little bit of that, but one thing that surprised me is, I think because of how I'm naturally attuned, I assumed it would go there more quickly, but I think the fact that most of this conversation is in like the mental arena makes it more of a challenge to bring it down to a practical level.
Is it the case? I was thinking about this actually. One of the things that has made these two conferences unique is in fact the separation. This came up in a post from Richard, who was at the conference on CRC Voices. There's been some there were a few members of CRC Voices that were at the conference, and so you have tensions between Orthodox and Catholic and Protestant and non-theist and agnostic and atheist. And in fact, one of the things that in fact divides the members of this group is in fact practice, which is interesting because when we had communion at Thunder Bay, the communion service was, interestingly enough, Orthodox couldn't participate for one reason or another. Catholics couldn't participate. Protestants could, some did, some didn't. Non-theists probably were a little bit on the fence. How should I participate? So I think you're right that practice is sort of looming behind these events. And part of the energy and interest is the diversity of backgrounds and, in fact, the fact that there isn't agreement on practice. So I don't know. All right, John, you want to jump in? Go ahead.
If I may, precisely on that point, I mean, you're immediately aiming for the top here when you're talking about practices and go straight to communion. I mean, that's kind of like the ultimate practice, the ultimate embodiment, the ultimate engagement. And I think there are quite a few layers prior to that where people are able to connect, and in practice also. In other words, to be together is a form of embodiment. It is a way of being in the presence of other people and not on your phone and not in front of a screen, and to actually jump on a plane and go to a different town. And there are practices associated with what we did that were very new and very unique and very unusual for quite a few people. I mean, there were people in the campground who had never camped before. There are people that said, I've never been out of my home state before. And here I am in California, in Chino, and I'm surrounded by these people, and I have to figure out a way to engage with them, and we gave them some tools to do that. So, I don't know. It's a win-win for me.
One of the things that John and I noticed when we were doing a little debriefing on the way to the airport on Monday morning was the fact that what we didn't see here was a lot of people sitting around in front of their smartphones. Smartphones would come out for picture taking. But beyond that, there was very little smartphone activity throughout the conference, at least that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
Now we do have some sound issues. Now, hang on. I'm gonna do a little. First, I'm gonna mute John. No, I muted Catherine. Okay, so I'm gonna mute. Yeah, Catherine, we've got some. We've got a lot of noise coming through your sound channel. I don't know. Oh, it just got better. Oh, that's because you muted. She's gonna get okay, John. Why don't now, John? You didn't go to Thunder Bay. You did go to Germany. So Catherine was not in Germany. She was in Thunder Bay. You were in Germany. You didn't go to Thunder Bay. And why don't you talk a little bit about the genesis of this conference then?
Well, the genesis should be glaringly obvious to you. So,
well, okay. So I'll back up a little bit. Well, John and I toured Europe for 3 weeks, and that gave John and I a lot of time to talk between us about estuary, about where this is going, about what we see its value as, and trying to sort of refine it and hone it and get it down to get it down to something. Where is this going? And so one of the things at the end of Europe, our European trip, one of the things I said to John was, not only would I like to see there be more opportunity for people to connect in estuary groups, there seems to be a hunger from these groups to participate in something another level up. We saw that in Germany hosting their event. We saw that in the Netherlands we had an event. And what was interesting about Thunder Bay was that Catherine and Eamon didn't really have an event. Catherine's brother has a place, Urban Abbey. And so then we saw the event before sort of an on the ground group. So then the thinking was, what if in fact, rather than having Estuary Inc., where there's some central organization that is centrally planning events around the world, what instead if we had different groups and individuals initiating events around the world, having the freedom to tailor them according to what they'd particularly like to do. And we've actually been seeing that. The Chicago group in June of last year organized an event. That was their second such event, and they are looking at further events. There are other places in the world that are, Germany, in fact, is continuing to want to do events. And so there are other places in the world that are doing this. And so then I kind of said to John Van Donk, I said after Thunder Bay, I said, John, I think it's your turn next. You're sort of the granddaddy of estuaries here. You've got a facility, and before we had in fact planned this event, I had met with the staff at John's church and talked about the possibility of them, given their facility, their organization, their size, the possibility of them hosting similar type events, not necessarily within sort of this little corner circuit, but just as a congregation. And that in fact had a
develop a public presence.
Yeah, develop a public presence. And in fact, you told one of our early fourth ideas for a fourth in this conference was in fact Rich Mao, who was a professor of philosophy at Calvin College back in the day. He became president of Fuller Seminary, and we did reach out to Richard Mao. He had some scheduling conflicts, so he couldn't do it. But what had now maybe a little bit of backstory in your church, John, for sort of how this developed, and that'll give some context.
Well, first, to clarify, when you introduced me at the conference, you said something about me having a plan for your life. I think that it's now been well established that I am on the receiving end of your plan for my life. So there you go.
Some of the best colonizers keep their schemes under wraps.
It's been revealed, Paul. It's been revealed. No, nice reciprocity here. I must say. So yeah. So this whole thing at Crosspoint, there has been some conversation among the younger generation at Crosspoint to kind of create a different presence in the community, not be the go-to evangelical bulwark, but also somewhat of a space for mutually respectful conversation across ideological lines, which is of course my tagline for Estuary, but that was not even on my radar when this topic first came up. Back in the day when we started talking about that, in fact, we had some things happening at Crosspoint Church that kind of put everybody in a bit of a funk. And one of the leaders, one of the elders of Crosspoint and myself, we went to see Rich Mao, who at that time was still the president of Fuller Seminary. So this is a long time ago. And we went and talked to him and, explained the situation and says, do you have any advice for us? He says, my advice for you is to create some event that focuses the attention away from yourself and do less navel gazing and be more alert and attuned to the needs around you in the community and seek to address that in a positive way. And do that communally and do that in a little grander scale, invite some other people to be part of the conversation. And that was his advice to us. And I was intrigued by that. And on the way home, I remember saying to my friend, well, what are we going to do? And he said to me, I don't know. What are we going to do? And nothing really happened. We just kind of dropped the ball between the two of us. And this was 10 years ago, about 7 years ago, I think. Anyway, so then that thought, I was reminded of that when this thing showed up on the radar, and was able to incorporate that in my presentation to the elders and say, hey, we have been challenged to do this. We have been challenged to be a voice in the community, or actually to model mutual respect across ideological lines, to actually be able to get a few people together from different backgrounds to talk about current issues and to and to be polite to one another, to be pleasant to one another, to be able to be in each other's company and not have to be polarized in the same way that so often happens in public spaces these days. And so the elders gave their general approval to the concept. And again, nothing happened. This was when you first showed up. This is already more than 2 years ago. So the thing was kind of on the back burner, and then you showed up in Chino after Thunder Bay and said, "John, it's your turn." And as reluctant as I was at the time, I could see that this was an opportunity to put into practice the conversations on the edge, the public dialogue thing, the challenge of Richard Mao to get out of our navels and to be a public presence. And so the whole thing kind of seemed like it was the right time, the right place, and then the wrong person to organize it. Obviously, I am. So it wasn't that difficult, though, to make it all happen because I had a magic secret formula.
Which was?
You want to know what my magic secret formula was?
I think we all do. Whenever there's a magic secret formula, we always want it to no longer be secret.
Catherine knows what it is. I called up Catherine and I said, "How did you do it?" And I'll do it the same way. So, so that's exactly what happened. I called up Catherine and she gave me the schedule and the speakers and the format and the budget and all the little foo-foo stuff around different things. And so I had more food than Catherine did, but because, I think everything through my stomach. So, so we had more food than in Thunder Bay, but we had the magic opening for the whole conference, which was invented in Thunder Bay. Paintball for Jesus. And I hope and trust that every conference from here on forward will begin with Paintball for Jesus, because it is an amazing way to bond. I want to tell a little anecdote about that, because we had a meeting at Crosspoint staff when we were talking about logistics, who's going to feed what rooms need to be arranged in this way, what are we going to do on the stage, blah, 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 blah. And at some point along the way, I said, yeah, we're going to start this opening with Paintball for Jesus. Eerie silence in the room. Except our Michelle, our executive secretary in our church, who pretty much tied up all the loose ends for the conference from a logistics point of view. She says, well, obviously you're going to do that. My kids do this all the time. I mean, it's a great way to bond. This is what men do. They beat each other up somehow, and then they are friends forever. And that is the magic formula of Paintball for Jesus. Thanks to Grim Grizz for the naming of it. And so now a whole new tradition has been established as one of the opening ceremonies for the conference. So that's kind of how I pictured the whole thing. So.
All right.
Thanks, Catherine, for making it all happen.
All right, why don't we transition to thoughts after the. So we ended on Sunday afternoon. Our last event was the trip to St. Andrews, and so we're not quite a week away. What has bubbled up so far, Catherine? Uh-oh. You're gonna have to change. You're gonna have to go back into the settings and change your
speaker. Microphone.
Yeah, your speaker.
Better?
Better. Yep.
Okay.
So I think, I probably have more questions than anything else right now.
Okay.
So trying to figure out, what is good pacing? What's the next time? How frequently? Pacing is a lot in conversation, right? So you need time to let it breathe. You need people's schedules to accommodate it. So, what's a good pacing for this to be? Because this was how long since Thunder Bay? Was it 9? Not even. It was September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April. Less than a year.
Yep.
A little less than a year. So the first thing is how frequently would it be good to try to get not any events, but this particular set of speakers together. That's the first one. The second one is, like I was saying already, for things to, like, which other, well, I wasn't saying this already. The other thought is, which other voices do we want to bring in? Which other aspects of this corner of the internet, people whose thoughts are very close, would enjoy being in this kind of dialogue, and would enjoy the whole, like, 3 days or whatever it ends up being, where you're with people and you're just talking. Because some people who are maybe like talking heads on the internet, they like that, but they wouldn't want to sit for 3 days and actually talk with people and dialogue. It's very challenging to do that. Might not know that from the outside, but watching it, you have to be sharp on your feet. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to be shown up. You have to be willing to push your own ideas into places you're not comfortable with. So who in adjacent areas would want to participate in that whole process? I think bringing in more voices would be good. I think particularly voices that have been underrepresented in this conference. So maybe the more non-theist, atheist, agnostic crowd.
Non-masculine.
Maybe some non-masculine individuals would be good. That came up in the conference. I ended up talking to a lot of the women because somebody had mentioned they wished that there had been some female-only spaces. And the question came up quite a bit of how do we want to engage the sex differences? So talking to other women, some of them said, we don't want that at all. We love the fact that it's all mixed. We love being fully participating in these dialogues. They maybe come from backgrounds where there's more segregation, so they enjoy the fact that there isn't here. But a couple people who said, yeah, like we would really like to have not everything, but maybe one or two things. So like an example given was maybe during Paintball for Jesus, the women could have a tea that is optional or something like that. So I think figuring out how to be more thoughtful.
Which would you have done? Which would you have done, Catherine, in that setting? If there had been tea for Jesus,
Paintball.
What would you have done? Yeah, no. You were good. You were good there. You were a force to be reckoned with.
Well, thank you.
Except for shooting Father Eric on your own team.
I know. But he immediately forgave me, which was evidence that he really is a priest. So that was good. But I think one of the questions is, what do we do with the gender splits? Because some people want things that not everybody does, but you want to try to make people, you're trying to make space for conversation. And some people need different things for that to happen. And then, yeah, I think for me, a question is how do you create forums for this to become more instantiated? I think the estuary, like practically the estuary is a great way to do that because you're bringing that spirit around to different places. That's a great way to instantiate the spirit of it. I do think in terms of moving the conversation more practically, I think we've done a good job as a community in being able to talk about ideas that are opposing to one another without feeling like somebody's being evangelical about it. And I think we could do that talking about practices more specifically as well. And not that those have to be prescriptive, but that it's insight into how some people do it, which could give people ideas on how they might move forward and understand, because the best way to see what the real spirit in a place isn't by looking at the ideas behind it, but it's to look at how they actually live their life. So if people can get more of a flavor of how people live their lives, then that actually gives them more hooks for moving forward in their own life than just the ideas. Although obviously the ideas are what the behaviors are ostensibly based on. They may not actually, it might be more tradition than things that people haven't even articulated, but even talking through that I think would be useful, not just for like others listening in, but to be self-analytic about our own behaviors and our own practices and how we're living our lives from whatever tradition we're in and how well that accommodates us to this very rapidly changing culture that we live in. So those for me are kind of the what's at the top.
Okay. John, what do you think now, 5 days out?
Yeah. Well, being the one-trick pony that I am, I look on my ElseNet subscriber list and people signed up. So I had people sign up to be new leaders. They will be part of the ElseNet conversations online, and other people signed up to want to be part of a group. I had a lovely thing happen. There is a group in New York that's for women only, and it's led by two people who kind of morphed their prior group, which was originally a grief support group after a member of that community passed away, and they basically did this to come together and help and support each other in this tragic loss. And that group morphed into an estuary group once these two leaders found out about estuary, and so they have been active participants in ElseNet to learn the tricks of the trade and the estuary protocol. But so people knew that there was something happening in New York, and then there were people from New York who wanted to be part of an estuary in New York, and well, there is no estuary in New York because it's closed for women only, and actually closed to that community. It's not even a listed estuary. They're not on the schedule. And both of those leaders have stepped forward and said, we will host another estuary alongside of the one that we are already doing, and we'll get that one off the ground. And when there's enough critical mass there and some leaders have been trained, and they can move forward on their own, and we go back to our own little holy huddle with women only. But sorry, Emily and Rachel, I didn't mean to say that. Sorry. But yeah, so a new estuary is going to happen in the great city of New York, and some of my previous ElseNet leaders are going to help make it happen. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the thing that I had hoped for and had envisioned. And quite frankly, Paul, I think that you kind of put that thought in my mind when you talked about the reciprocity of the estuary project. The estuary hub events stimulate local formation, and the local groups create hub events when the time comes, whenever the time comes, and on whatever timeline. I think your discussion, Catherine, about what is the proper spacing for these things is relevant. But again, this may also be clarified and affected by location, because if there is going to be an ElseNet meeting, or no, if there's going to be a hub event in Southern California in May, there's absolutely nothing that prevents the group in Massachusetts and New England to organize their thing in June. They may reach a different audience, more local, or perhaps the people from the East Coast find it easier to go there and get cheaper air tickets. They couldn't make it all the way to California, but they can make it to Boston. And so what I mean to say is that I'm not sure that we can ever really articulate a proper spacing of these events. It kind of depends on where they are and what's happening, because I know that there was already talk about something happening in Israel next year, early next year, and then Germany wants to do a redo in the summer, so that's a few months later. So I mean, you can't really talk about a timeline worldwide when there are so many different locations where this thing could happen. And I totally want to encourage every local area that is even thinking remotely about organizing some event that puts estuary protocol on the map, or the estuary project on the radar of people. Go ahead and do that. I mean, I think British Columbia would be a super place for all these people to get together and do something that can draw from the Seattle area to Pacific Northwest. There are so many hub areas that sort of form a central hub for a wider area. They don't all have to come to Southern California. It's kind of a dump here anyway.
Let's talk about the size of this conference, because one of the things sort of bubbling up with these events are questions of size. Now, we had 200 people registered for this, and also something that I think, Catherine, you sort of pioneered in Thunder Bay, and we replicated here too, where you have a 2-day event. So Friday and Saturday is sort of the official event, And then you have sort of these add-ons on Sunday that are more, I mean, everything's optional, of course, but you had a meditative practice with John Vervaeke. There was both in Thunder Bay and in Southern California. These were hosted by local Christian worshiping communities, and there was a service, and both I was given the privilege of preaching in both of these contexts. And then of course in the afternoon we had a special event in Thunder Bay. We had Jonathan Pajot talking about sort of the language of iconography, and here we had the trip to St. Andrews. But this was our largest event. Let's talk about size in terms of upsides and downsides, and what size affords, and what affordances are given by different sides.
So, because for me the conversation is so forefront, I am biased towards wanting to keep these types of events under the Dunbar number. So you kind of want to keep it under 250. Now that doesn't mean there's not space for a huge event, but that would be a different kind of event with different goals. Or much smaller events, say 50 people and under. Again, different meeting, different goals. The affordances for something like this, I feel like you're able to know by name the people who are there by the end of the conference. I wasn't, because of the role I played, I didn't get to have as much access to people day in, day out as everyone else did, but still I probably knew half the people's names by the time we were done. And you're just more able to move between conversations, and I think that it promotes people just having the conversation and less of feeling like you're in too big of a crowd to be seen. It has a bit more intimacy to it. And almost anybody, I think everybody who wanted to talk to you or one of the other speakers, they were able to. It might have been brief, but they were able to do it.
Yeah. And we had a little bit of a debriefing Sunday evening with Jonathan and John, and both of them mentioned the value both in Thunder Bay, and especially this time. They said this time actually it was a little bit easier, that they were able to have more substantive conversations with their audience, with people from their audience that they wouldn't necessarily have gotten a chance to. Now on my channel, even though I haven't done a lot of them lately, I have sort of forefronted Rando's Conversations, Estuary. My channel is smaller than theirs, so I think it's a little bit easier to get to me. Some of you might argue it's not easy enough, but I think both John and Jonathan, they very much valued that, because from this point of view, you're talking to cameras and screens, and then you're talking to sort of a hierarchy of people in this little conversation. Unless people at a certain level in terms of fame or audience or status, you don't really get below that. And what this conference afforded for John and Jonathan was, a good chance to hear from people who are taking in their content and engaging with it. And for someone who is producing, talking about this stuff, producing material, that sort of feedback is absolutely essential. So yeah, that the opportunity, I agree, keeping the numbers, under 200, 250, and also structuring the conference in such a way. It's a difficult balance. I have probably an abnormal capacity for talking to randos, and conference speakers might not all have that same interest or capacity. But so then to have a conference structured in such a way that sort of people, the people who are producing this kind of content can listen, have conversations, not just on stage, but also on stage, but to have lunch with, to have dinner with, to hear from people. So, yeah.
So here is a practical observation. We originally had set a goal of 300 participants for this conference. So now those of us listening to this who were at the conference, imagine half again as many people in that dining room. That would have been an unmitigated disaster. Now, the CrossPoint staff had tried to get their head around that, and were fully prepared to put people in all the periphery rooms. In other words, move away all the chairs, put the table back in the middle, put chairs around those tables, and actually find a place to sit for 300 people. It would have been a logistical workaround nightmare for the staff to be moving all those tables and chairs between estuary sessions and meals and estuary sessions, so that the whole thing would have been just completely unmanageable. And in fact, I was told that, you know, if it was going to require that kind of staff labor and staff effort and staff participation, I was going to end up paying for that. So as it was, we saved a lot of money by 100 people not showing up.
Well, that was good. That was good. And with all the conferences, you never know with a conference like this, because how many people will come? You don't know. We had the same questions in Europe. We had the same questions in Thunder Bay. And it's a logistical challenge for the organizers, because you want to have a budget. And I think, you know, one of the things that I encouraged, you know, John with is, you know, make sure you have decent honorariums for our speakers, because especially Jonathan, this now is his livelihood. And so if he's going to spend a week out of his year doing this, you know, you not only really have to cover expenses, you should also cover his time. John Vervaeke and I have a little different situation in that we have the kind of jobs that can allow for this. But for potential, somebody, David Walker asked, you know, will KC get a plug? Kansas City, I mentioned Chicago often. I mentioned a whole bunch of areas. Kansas City is another area in the U.S. that has a lot of people and some notable people. Jess is in Kansas City. Lance is in Kansas City. I don't know if do we have any ElseNet participants in Kansas City, John?
They are observers from a distance, and they keep informed about what's happening. But sometimes I see snide comments in the comment section about fog light or fog machines and spotlights in evangelical churches on steroids. You know who you are.
So I would say to Kansas City and Minneapolis, quite frankly, because Minneapolis is another area that we have a lot of potential. And yep. Minneapolis actually is sort of nicely close to Western Ontario and the Midwest. It's a great fly-in city. Chicago's been very aggressive and proactive in terms of setting things up. And so I think
will happen in Olympia.
Yep. And so I think Pacific Northwest, Kansas City, Minneapolis, these are areas that y'all have to get together, organize yourselves a little bit, get a little bit of structure, and I'll certainly be responsive to it. All right, let's talk anything else about well, let's talk a little bit about the difference, because I've started putting out the speeches, the on stage onto my channel. I think that is a distortion, because it makes people think that the conference is really sitting and listening to talking people on the stage. Let's try and correct that a little bit here, because one of the things I heard many, many times from people was, you know, for them, the real heart of the conference was not just access to the kinds of things that, that people can get on YouTube.
If I may, I think that the conference became an opportunity for 20 ElseNet leaders to shine. 20 people from my ElseNet Estuary Leader Support Network community that regularly meet online to talk about how to lead a group and what are the pitfalls and what are the situations you can find yourself in, and what strengths do we bring to the table, and what does the estuary protocol do. 20 of those people showed up for this conference. And I gave them all a job. I lined them all up and said, you know, when people come walking in the door, you grab the first 10, you grab the second 10, you grab the third 10, and it was kind of a surreal experience for the latecomers to the conference, because they would walk through the door and there'd be nobody there. You know, these people that are used to coming late and they think that the whole thing is going to be in full swing. No place to hide. So these groups were all distributed among the various rooms that our campus affords, and they all had a separate space. and they were doing estuary introductions. And estuary introductions means what's your name, where you're from, how did you get here, by what circuitous route. We're not talking about airlines, but I mean, you know, what connections happen in your life that somehow you find yourself in this space? Who talked to you, and who got under your skin, and what motivated you to spend X amount of dollars to go to Chino, California, and sleep in a tent for a couple nights. And then the fourth question: what do you hope to gain from being here? And that's kind of where a little bit more specific application. I think, Catherine, we didn't hear all those conversations. We didn't hear what people said, but I have a feeling that there were people that walked away with a new resolve to do something different in their lives. And so I think that even without that being very prominent in our afterward reflections, maybe we're going to hear something in subsequent feedback from our group here during this live stream that maybe some people will say, you know, I intended and I resolved to do this or to do that after the conference, and then we can find out how's that working. I mean, how's that actually coming into being, and how can we help you with that? You know, so there's that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, alongside that, I think that a lot of the conference really is people talking in the estuary groups, but over meals, in breaks, after the conference is over. There's a lot of people at the hotel who are hanging out in the hot tub by the pool, a lot of people at the campgrounds hanging around the fire, people going out for dinner, people drinking a few beer together. It was a lot of like the lectures, or whatever you want to call them, were great, but predominantly they served as jumping off points for what happened for most of people most of the time, because most of the time they were talking with each other. And one of the things that I liked in what, I don't think it's come up yet on your channel yet, but in John Vervaeke's talk, he's talking a little bit about home base and how you have a home base and you move out and you move back to home base. And he said that for him, this is kind of functioning as home base. And I think that that's true for a lot of people. Having these conversations, and in a little microcosm, the lectures kind of served as home base for the conference itself, where we'd all come together, we'd hear a thought, but then we go out, we talk, we gather ideas with one another, and then you come back, we're all in a room together, we hear one person's thought, the speaker. And so that was functioning a little bit in the conference, but I think for folks at this point, already only 2 meetings in with the same group of speakers, I know there's been other meetings, but just with the same group of speakers, it's functioning that way for them too. And I imagine it'll be the same way with the Germany group when they have their second festival. It'll feel a little bit like coming back to home base.
And also, I think that what is actually happening is that the panelists model a kind of way to be together with other people. The mutual respect, for start, that's the baseline. The mutual respect is the baseline. But then to see a relationship emerging between Paul and Jonathan and John, and to see how you facilitated that, Catherine, and to see how another person like myself can rather fluidly, you know, enter into that and become part of that to some degree, although I never quite felt quite up there. But what I'm trying to say is that you model a way for people to be together, and you model a way for people of totally different perspectives to find common ground and to find a place to connect and to care for one another, to actually be friends. And I think that is a very live demonstration of what is possible in real life. And I think that it would, I'm not sure how much that needs to be pointed out, as I am doing right now, and how much of that is just caught. People catch that and they see it, they've seen it online already, and they've seen it in 2 conferences now. And I think that is a way to kind of demonstrate rather naturally, you know, a different way to be together rather than trolling and polarizing.
I should say that I did throughout the conference and after the conference a lot of sort of quizzing people about their impressions from the conference. And even though I think there was appreciation for what was said on stage in terms of the content of the talks, almost all of the feedback, the positive feedback I got was about the individual face-to-face conversations with the people. And I think starting out with the estuary gatherings first made so that nobody had to sit alone at a meal. It was sort of like freshman orientation. Everybody already had a little bonded group of people they got to know a little bit. And if you didn't know anybody else at the conference, you didn't have a relationship with any of the people on stage or any of the other people sort of in the, let's say, the lieutenant class that we have here of people who have their own interest. If you don't know Grim Grizz or Chad or any of the other people that you've seen on screens, you've got buddies and you've got friends that you can go to lunch with and you can sit with. And even if you came alone, if you do just a little bit of you have a little bit of initiative, you'll have a conference buddy to go through the conference with. And I think that's really critical. Grizz, are you about ready to go in? Some of you who are sort of still in the, I'm going to need some space in the StreamYard room. If you could voluntarily dip out now, you can come back in. I don't know, Grizz, if you have the, if you have the link from the Discord, otherwise I can post it in. Thank you for those of you who are voluntarily doing this, because I want to get Grim Grizz to talk a little bit about camping. Well, we could talk a little bit about hot tubbing. Again, the after hours conversations are also key with something like this. And that tended to happen at the hotel by the pool and the hot tub. And even though it was ostensibly supposed to close at 10, it wasn't enforced, which was lovely. And Rick said that the 15-minute timer on the hot tub was kind of a pain, but it afforded more conversation. And especially for me, I was only in the hot tub one night, but
a whole night.
The hot tub was our campfire. Yes.
A whole night in the hot tub.
Well, not the whole night, but at least a few hours, because it gave me a chance to, again, listen to some of the other individuals who I might not have gotten much of a chance. And then to a certain degree in a hot tub, you're in a relaxed setting. You can share.
Is this the right moment for me to point out that once upon a time, for a 10-year period in my life, I was a hot tub repair person?
This is a perfect time for you to point that out, John. I don't know exactly how that's gonna help us right now, but John,
if you have a problem with your hot tub, call me. I'll refer you.
You were a truck driver too, so I'm sure if we had a problem with a bus driver, you could have stepped in and driven one of those buses without any trouble. One of the things I discovered when I was in Europe with John is a very handy man to have around. He's not afraid to take initiative. He's not afraid to ask for favors. And there were a few times we were kind of in a rough spot, and John had an idea, and he steps in, and off we go. So really good. And Grim Grizz, he said he was going to make coffee. I don't know how long it takes for him to make coffee. Chad, you want to come in and talk about camping a little bit until Grim Grizz gets in? Maybe Chad can't either. I did visit. Grim asked in the comments about visiting the campground. I visited the campsite a few times, and again, if I didn't have to speak, part of what speaking means is prep, and I knew that if I was camping, no prep would get done. I knew that. So let's see. Oh, there's Chad. Chad, talk to us about camping.
Hello,
Chad.
Sorry, you got setting up the audio is always weird. So can you hear me?
Yep, hear you fine.
Hi. Look I'm tiling. How strange.
You missed the spot to the left there, chat. Top left.
Oh,
made you look.
You bastard. Hey, John, I have a really serious question. Can you milk me? I know that you worked on a dairy, but anyways, I just made it awkward.
Yes, you did make it awkward. I want you to talk about camping, Chad. Talk
Well,
to
that's
us about
kind
the
of
camping experience. I'm going to need somebody else to drop out of the studio room here so that Grizz has a way to get in.
well. If you camped with me and you hung out with me, you would get questions like that. So that was part of it. So no, it was really great. So the first night I went, my tent was a total disaster, and so my lovely wife had a tent door dashed to the house or to the campground, and then I came over and met you guys. But overall, the camping was, I don't know, that was the. It's hard to say what was best part of all of it. Is like the whole event. I couldn't see the next event not having camping, basically, and I can almost see an entire event where camping is the only option, and actually maybe even where people would stay and all that. Maybe
In
then we can
Germany,
get
most of the people camped.
right. Maybe we can get Mathieu Pajot out there, and have him bring his yurt and show us how to live on the wild. But no, it was great. Any other questions?
There used to be interesting studies on camping became sort of a fad in the 60s and 70s. And there are interesting studies in terms of family cohesion and bonding with families that camped and families that didn't. So I really think there is something to the camping thing.
The second or the third night we were there, I was talking with Emma. We were talking about Hillsdale and school and stuff, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see these rugrats next door. Some people are burning American flags. I'm like, what is going on over there? And they were. It was actually really powerful, and I'm watching. I'm like, oh, they're burning another one. And they're all standing there with their hands on their over their hearts, and they're doing flag retiring ceremony.
Oh, okay.
And
it's part of the irony of flag burning. It's
yeah, no, it was like
kind of respect.
And so they were there with their parents and stuff, and they were all singing. And I thought like there was something very powerful about seeing that in light of the event that we were having, and seeing like the opposite of domicide. And so that was interesting. Hey, Grizz.
I'm 3 minutes in the past. I didn't take the time to catch up from while I was making coffee entirely.
No, that's okay.
I asked John if he could milk me, so there's that.
That's Chad, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome.
Yeah.
All right, Grizz, let's talk about because right away when this thing started, camping came up very quickly. Camping's obviously potentially for people a more economical way to afford a conference because you can have your housing. But you took to the camping pretty quickly, and I think John gave you a degree of responsibility, et cetera. Talk to us about sort of the rise of the camping and then how you think it went and maybe what could go better or some other ideas you have based on it.
The rise of the camping. Well, you see, Paul, it happens that I don't know how he's developed the skill set to do it, but Van Donk has developed the character assessment thing, and he recognizes a self-destructive person won't do anything for their own good. But if you give them responsibilities that helps other people, then they'll actually do what's good for them. And I think that's how I became to be in charge of the lodging option for the event. And it was perfect because as a founding member of the fraternal regiment embodying narcissistic sociopathy, hello, friends, I needed that in order for me to attend the event. I needed to have a container for all of the extra things. You saw what, for example, like trying to get too much into the paintball for Jesus as myself resulted in you talking about me in a jockstrap on Benjamin Boyce and nothing actually happening. And so, but see, the Chino thing became a container for the screwball ideas that I'm always trying to launch into the sphere, such as people should be able to witness signs and wonders performed if all these religious people are going to be in one place. And like, I couldn't count on God to pull that off, so I had to make it happen. No, he did it. It's through me. So, so there's the spiel. Make me small again, and let's just talk now.
There's something to what Grizz has just said. I think if we want to talk about incorporating practice, there's something to giving Grizz a job, or giving me a job and doing whatever in some sort of service aspect. I think there's stuff like that can be, because we're so interested in talking about stuff, and it's nice to have little opportunities to do something and embody something. So that's all I want to say.
All right. Okay. And we'll see you, Chad. Any other camping takeaways? If you had to do it again, what would you do differently, Grizz?
I would have been more. Well, first we had a surprise because what the lodgings we were told what they were going to be wasn't what they were, and I didn't utilize what they ended up being, which was like instead of a mass of 2-man tents, we had a couple, like 4 or 5 that were clearly 4 or 5 person tents, and in a better situation, people would have been assigned to use those. I don't think that they were utilized properly, but the chaos manner of organization is that people step up to fill so everybody else is comfortable. Like, people sharing equipment and looking after each other happens because the organization is so disorganized.
Father Eric made breakfast for people several times.
And offered morning mass. You got to see him in this whole regalia and participate if
He
you
offered
wanted.
morning mass at the campground.
Up until like Friday when he started attending the first couple of days or whatever. I don't know how great the hot tub was, or how I'd love to hear the stories from that. But for me, it was the Anna Chino event, and we happened to be listening to speakers. I'm curious for the people who didn't camp with us that came by, what their impression of it, because a lot of people came to visit, and so that was. But I think that in the future, if you're you should always do a camping option, and maybe with a little more preparedness. And clearly, we should have more merch lined up before the event. Having to have somebody do that on the fly was.
Well, merch in these events has a sketchy history, so. Yeah. But
Catherine specifically advised against it. She lost most of her money on the merch in Thunder Bay, and said to me, "Keep that out of the picture, and you'll be better off." So I did. I did exactly what she told me to do.
Do you have any left, Catherine?
I have a lot left.
Then you haven't lost money yet. Let's talk soon.
Grim kind of brings up for me an idea that if you really want a movement to go, we're probably going to have to find a place that gets established well enough that they can actually have a cycle. It might be a certain kind of event once a year. It might be every other year. But this is a very young thing that we've been doing. But a lot of those hiccups, once you do something a second time in the same place, now suddenly you have traditions, and the campground operators, what is there, the people that come, and so there's potential for that kind of thing as well in the future if one of these hub areas decides they want to have more of a perennial presence. So.
Did you just speak the first invocation of Thunder Bay Lightning Strike 2?
It's like the way I've set this thing up, or the way I imagine it, is that the different localities are autonomous and will be free to form and instantiate according to what it's very Protestant. I know Jacob said it's very Protestant, according to what that locality sees as their vision. And I am not I am not emanating down to everyone how it should go. I'm allowing for a good bit of emergence. So there we go.
And Jacob will gladly help everybody do it his way.
Yes, he will.
But
All right. Go ahead,
I
Catherine.
think it's helpful to talk a little bit about what, like, there's a certain spirit to what we're doing and what the elements are that come together to make that happen. So I think one clearly is paintball. One is camping, or at least I know one of the things in Thunder Bay people really liked was there was a lodging option where you had big open rooms and there was a backyard with a campfire, and so it was a similar but maybe a little more housed. Part of it is structured groups or semi-structured groups that help make conversation conducive, so that, and I think it's helpful to try to articulate what the things are so that these groups that want to instantiate it have ideas of what kinds of things to do, and they can choose between that what works for them or an alternate version of whatever that is. But I think trying to articulate which aspects help set the tone. I think that
sell reduced rate tickets to estuary leaders up front.
Well, I think you're right, Catherine. And I think, camping is certainly facilitated by dryness. Both Germany and Thunder Bay, you had weather challenges. And so we could even talk about some degree of communal living, at least for the conference, because the boxes that we live within tend to, again, puts up walls between us, and a degree of communal living sort of breaks open some things and allows a degree of friendship and fellowship to generate. All right.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Grizz.
If I were to do one based on what I saw at Chino, I would not only do specific camping options, but like you're saying, the hot tub was a group and camping was a group. There's probably a third one for each speaker, and maybe associate one speaker with each, like because the speaker's associated, he'll stop by the campground, or this one will swing by the hot tub, and as speakers, they can host their own little, we have a private thing going on at this event we're at. You don't have to be at the event, but so I'm throwing that out. Bye. Thank you, Paul.
All right. Thanks, Grizz. All right. Thank you, John and Catherine. You're welcome to stay, or if you got to go someplace, that's fine. I'm going to start bringing some people from the studio in. I've dropped a link in the Discord that you can find the link in the Discord from the conference to get in. Those of you who are below, I'm going to bring you in and sort of give you a few minutes in the big window to talk about your reflections from the conference. If you have any questions for us, and then I'm just going to have you in for a few minutes. I'm going to put you then back down into the pool, and then you should probably leave so that others can come in. And I'd like to get as many voices through here as we can, and as many reflections. So I have one or two bullet point reflections and maybe a question that you'd like to ask, and then so others can have a chance too. All right. So Doug, you're in first. Hey, Doug.
Great. Thanks for all I want to just say is thank you for, especially to Catherine and John. I know y'all did a ton of logistics work to make it happen. Meeting everybody in person was a huge blessing. From business friends, what we always talk about is the meeting after the meeting is sometimes more important than just the meeting itself. One of the things that I told John is I never, in my business experience, you never start a meeting, like a seminar with a breakout room, but it worked insanely well. And I was so impressed with the people in my room. I was blessed to help facilitate a room. Man, I had some great people, and again, total strangers, and yet the conversations, you guys talk a lot. Paul, you talk a lot about the spirit in the room. The spirit in the room really just caught on. And it was great to watch people who may not have ever had another reason to have a connection other than they were randomly assigned to a room, and it was amazing. So I'll stop there and I'll jump out to give space for other folks. But just thanks for everybody. Thanks for everybody who participated and was part of conversations, whether by the fire smoking a pipe or in the hallways or outside, wherever it was. I got to get more. This was great.
All right. Thank you, Doug. It's great to meet you. Okay, Aaron. You're on, Aaron. What were your takeaways from the conference?
Takeaways. Well, I would say that there's wisdom in the campfire. I had just come back from a kind of a conference of its own for primitive skills where people lived together for a week. Actually, this was a shorter one. It's only 3 days, usually they're 5. After about day 3, there's a rhythm that starts to form and people really gel. I feel like that started to happen even at the conference, but it's like right as if people are hitting their stride, then we all had to take off and do stuff. So I think there's real wisdom in there that not just there's something about living with people, and it's that nice sweet spot between what is it, guest and fish, something to do with after 3 days. I forget exactly. So it's this nice sweet spot, and I think being with each other over a period of time is very valuable and could reach out. Also, I wanted to say there's something talking about you guys are talking about the friendships that we're seeing on stage. Modeling is so important, I think, in an embodied way, and having those spaces for people to do that was great. It's great for people to see it happen and then do it, like in these little breakout sessions, and whether it be a campground or a sidebar or a hallway. I think you guys did a phenomenal job. Catherine, I was really impressed, very, very impressed. There's something about holding space that is not easy to do. Actually, every one of you guys did an excellent job. And I just want to say, like, I'm going to echo the same thing everyone else says. I was very impressed, and I want to say thank you. I met a lot of people. It was amazing the number of different traditions that was represented in a respectful way. I don't want to take up too much time. But yeah, and reach out to me if you guys want to talk about gatherings at all, because yeah. Thanks.
I think your point about length of time, a number of people made to me at the conference as well. Some people said they would have liked, let's say, a week-long conference instead of just a weekend. And I think, again, part of my vision about having these hubs that facilitate their own conferences, I think, facilitates more of that opportunity where
there's
people
something
can do
about
longer.
Getting that time right. It can't be too long, can't be too short. 3 days is about when people usually hit their stride.
Yep.
When they're living together anyway.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
All right. Trey.
Hello.
How are you doing, Trey?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
Good.
I think the main takeaways was like the importance of camping. Just sort of sitting around the fire and sort of talking to other people, staying up really late and really getting to know people, especially just like how fast it went. Meaning that like you talk to somebody and then you start talking a little more, and then you hear the whole like life story and you start getting like really, really deep. So I really enjoyed that. And I think the only thing I would have liked a little bit more was just a little bit more estuary, I guess, in the conference, a little bit more estuary.
Didn't Doc pay you?
No.
Well, say more about that, Trey.
Well, I think that you have all these conferences, you see them on stage, but you have all these thoughts you kind of want to get out. And it also allows, if you have an estuary, the idea of like continuation. So you can have a thought in one of the like conferences or one of the parts, and then the next day you can build on top of that, and then the next day you can sort of build on top of that. So you have this sort of continuity of thought that you can move through.
Okay. Good. Any questions for Trey? Trey, John was just enamored with your hair and loved to, and I know why that was, but maybe because I have none, and there's just nothing up there. So
I see Trey regularly, so
yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, Trey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew, a very regular on streams, but apparently you just were a real short timer at the conference. I didn't even get a chance to see you.
Yeah, I came to Thursday dinner only, and that was it. So I wish I could have stayed, but I had midterms this week. So, life gets in the way.
Okay, so why? So you had midterms, so you couldn't do the conference. Why did you feel the need to show up? I mean, you show up in these streams all the time. What's with you?
I think this little corner has hit on the importance of embodied knowledge and all that sort of stuff, like right on the head. So, getting to see people in person and talk with them, and even just having silent car rides with them is important. It was a great time.
Okay, all right. Anything else, Andrew, or is that pretty much what you wanted to say?
One little thing. I think that whole experience is part of why it's hard to do on-ramp stuff with this, because you try explaining it like in terms of a perspective, and it's hard to get the feel of it, to express the feel of it.
So you think that these conferences could be, instead of, let's say, having online on ramps, you think of these conferences as on ramps.
Yeah, and estuary as well.
On estuary and and conferences as on ramps. Okay, good. All right. Thank you, Andrew.
My pleasure.
Now, Lance, I don't recall you being at the conference at all.
Well, I just wanted to pop in. You threw out a challenge to Kansas City out here, right? I would just like to let you know that we are not prepared to make any announcements yet, but we are well down the path of a lot of the things you guys are talking about. We have a very unique location and experience. We flushed out budgets and everything else, so we're in the game, Paul, and we need to dot some I's and cross some T's and get some things figured out. But I think, we have something that I think would be truly unique and embody in a lot of these things you guys are talking about that would be nice to have. We've got that stuff figured out. It's really cool.
Okay. Well, we wait in eager anticipation for do you have a name for your group, or is just Kansas City? Is it just the...
Well, we do Estuary KC. We were David, who's doing some writing stuff with Chad, is part of the Estuary, and then obviously Jess is the heart and soul of Kansas City Estuary.
Yeah.
We were in Jess's driveway last night doing Estuary till about midnight at a fire pit in his driveway, and so we flushed out a lot of this stuff. And so we just need to we have some unique ideas of maybe some new people. That I think would be very interesting for this little corner. And a lot of, let's just say the weekend would have a lot of embodied interaction, central location, play, some really cool things.
I bet I know. We're all going to restore a house together, right, Len?
That sounds good, but that's not it.
Oh.
All right. So
anyway, So challenge given, Paul. Challenge has already been accepted.
All right. We look forward to hearing something from Kansas City sometime in the future. So very good. I'm gonna bring Connor in now. Connor, you've been waiting here for a while. Grizz, did you have something you needed to say?
No, I'm in line for the other thing.
Okay. Go ahead, Connor. We lost Connor completely. All right, Grizz, you're up next then.
Oh my God, I got to meet Sevilla and Karen, and I know all of you know that in my timeline, John Vervaeke's not this humble man, but the philosopher king. And since Paul sabotaged my asking him the onstage question with his control over Catherine, by circumventing and saying, no, don't let him talk to John, make him talk to Pasio. Since Pastor Paul did that, and I didn't get to ask the question to John on stage, I approached him afterwards, and I tell you, by being within that range, like physical distance of that man, I know why in my timeline he is a philosopher king. Be very careful of him. And on that note, I really wanted to highlight what Art said in your chat right here. I've been trying to explain why I'm not insane and in a cult to my family all weekend. for camping with internet friends, because that's funny, and like everything serious I say, people laugh and we move on. But if we can actually address that, I think that'd be good. I love you guys.
All right, thanks, Grizz. Paul, Caleb, you don't seem ready to come in. When you're ready, just have your camera on. Rebecca, you were in before. There are a few of you that were in before. If you want to get in, drop back into the studio and we'll bring you up. So I'd really love to hear from Rebecca. Paul.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. This is a guy I played paint. I was on the same team as him, paintball twice. So what are your takeaways from the conference, Paul? What are your reflections?
Well, I think I told you this. You're definitely the toughest of all three of the major hosts. The one that can stick with the paintball the longest. I think that's what this is all about. It's all over. We can quit now. Paul, you won, and we're good.
Paintball for Darwin.
Yeah, no, it's been a whirlwind. I actually had a chance to sort of, digest some of it. I took a trip to a monastery on the way back and did a lot of thinking, and it's not all fully set yet. It's still sort of swirling around even despite that. But the spirit, we talked about in Thunder Bay, the spirit that was there, and that spirit was fully there again. It's very interesting to see how easily that happens when we're all together. And I wonder what the future is of that. And I spoke to a lot of different people about the future of that. And I would say, I don't know, I might be wrong on this, but I would say maybe 20% of the people were at the Thunder Bay conference. And yet, despite there maybe not being the same faces, the spirit was very similar. And I think that there's a core and this sort of nested sort of feeling of what's happening that I can't describe, but I know it by its fruit, what it is. And you can call it what you want, but it was really something special. And I plan to attend further. Hopefully you guys don't make it too hard to do that.
What would make it hard?
Well, I mean, some exotic locations might be difficult for some, I guess. But, I don't know that I'm predicting that. I'm a guy with 2 kids, and it was a real fluke that I could, do this twice in a row. And, the more times I want to be part of it. I feel like it's growing. I feel like every time there's something that's growing with it. And I couldn't tell you this time why I was wanting to attend as much, because everyone says, well, it's not going to be the same as the first, but it's moving. Whatever this is moving, and it's sort of growing. And I think that if we can gel it, it's so interesting because each of you has your part. And I think that was the most crucial element of what we sort of established when you guys were all on stage together, is that everybody's playing a super important role. All the Johns and Catherine, you're just, perfect in the role. And and you, Paul, obviously too. So, yeah, thank you so much. I will definitely attend in the future. Hopefully.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Caleb.
Good work.
Oh, we can't hear you. Oh, you're muted. There you go.
Hey.
So, thoughts?
Man, I was lucky enough to be in John's estuary group with Paul, and yeah, doing that breakout room right away really set a tone for the whole thing. That was an amazing experience. And I just love the spirit of what was there in person, and it really left me interested. Find ways that I can contribute to like moving the ball forward, getting more people involved.
Oh, your audio just took a big. Now I'm hearing echo too. Something happened in your system, Caleb.
Oh no.
Oh, now
I
you're
may
better.
have a bag in here. Is that good?
Yeah.
Well, I'll try to squeeze the thoughts out real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, it just got me really excited to find ways to bring this to my community and get more people involved. Even though this is a very uplifting and positive thing, I have this sense that it's very punk rock. It's very like countercultural, even though it's like upward. It's something that I think a lot of young people would really love. So yeah, I'm just excited to find ways to contribute.
Okay. Okay. Good. Rebecca, I had a number of conversations with Rebecca. In fact, my last breakfast Monday morning I had with Rebecca, and so you had a lot of thoughts, and you shared a lot of those thoughts with me. So share with the rest of us.
So, yeah, wow, 300 people at a conference. John, that would be terrible. That would be too much.
Yeah, I agree.
These 5 big personality traits. I met some other introverted people. You can be introverted, and you can be high in agreeableness, which makes you, open, high in agreeableness, and also high in openness, so open to new experiences. So you can, go do these kind of exciting things, but being around like a really big group of people is kind of overwhelming. I can really see how the camping would be the ideal vehicle for, people kind of out there on the margins. You can smoke easily at the campground. It's an automatic kind of setting for being together. It's hard to go in a big dining room up to a big table where other people who are a talkative kind of people, sort of extroverted, just sort of, it's anxiety provoking. At least it was for me. Uh, the estuary, the small groups was I met one person that I probably will. We've already talked, and we'll probably stay talking. I don't think I would have met that person if I hadn't been in that small group. So more small group would be good. And John, to your point about this whole concept of estuary, this is this is like how the world works. How it's like these are biological systems based on biological systems. You've got this concept of community. It's not that practical for people to continuously to get together in big groups, fly all the way across the country. It's expensive. You have to take time out, and it doesn't sustain relationship. But if you break these groups down into these smaller nodes, and they're all sort of interconnected, then it stays alive. The ideas stay alive. The relationships are there. They're sort of connected, even though you might not be seeing like a Massachusetts group, if there ever will be a Western Massachusetts group.
Oh, even
With a
Western
Kansas
Massachusetts
City
group.
group.
Yeah, that's a taller order. I'm well underway to the Eastern Massachusetts group, but
Okay. That's
Massachusetts
about
is
all I had to
small.
say.
well, why did you go? Because we get a lot of young men coming through, and here you don't fit the stereotype. Why did you come to this conference?
So I think probably is my path on this Christian path that I came to over a period of, I'd say, like the last maybe eight years or so, and before it was happening before I listened to you or Pajot or Peterson's Bible series, but I came to you. You all helped me on my path. I'm very, it's like averse to joining organizations, or certainly a church. Grew up, it's like, no, we don't go to church. That is like a it's just superstition, and it doesn't make practical sense. The world, the natural world, and science are, sort of where you see miracles happening. So I wouldn't have. I don't think I would have even. I might have just had my own private, personal brand of Christianity or God, my concept of God, if it hadn't been for you and Pajot, and just listening to this wonderful, Christian story. It's such a fantastic story. So I wanted to come because I think because of that. It's just you're part of the story. You really, Paul, you are like this pastor that you're gathering people around you that would have not have happened without this technology, really, of the internet.
Well, thank you. All right. So thank you, Rebecca, and thank you for coming.
Okay, thanks for having me.
All right.
Yeah.
Corey.
Hey, everybody.
You came with wife and children. That was another
All three of them.
Yeah, that was another aspect of this. Well, let's hear you first, then I want to talk about, because we had some couples come to this, and I think having couples there adds something to the conference that just having usually a bunch of single guys tends to be the major. But so how on earth did you talk your wife into this?
Actually, it was convenient for me. She's the one who got me started on this whole path because she discovered Jordan Peterson's book first and convinced me to read it. Normally it's going the other direction, but she gets the credit for this. And so she's been a part of this conversation from the beginning. And I'm very, very blessed to have her as a conversation partner. And the first thing I'll say, I want to echo what everybody else said. The estuary group sidebar conversations was incredible to experience. We were both really excited to hear the speakers, but getting to know people and hearing their stories was by far the highlight for both of us. But yeah, that's part of why I wanted to come in to your question. Let's see, kind of like what Caleb said earlier, we're kind of looking for ways to make this a thing for more types of people. I think Grim made a comment on his debrief the day after, how there was such a variety of people, all the way from young people kind of finding their way who spend a lot of time on the internet, all the way up to quote unquote well-established people, people with families and careers and things like that. And Margaret and I talked about it. I think it's very important for families to be able to provide the kind of communal structure, because we already have the kind of established structure that we can invite other people into, in a sense. And that's kind of how we've seen our project. Really since the time that we got married, we wouldn't have called it that, but that we and even with bringing our kids on that last day on Sunday, it was partly to give my parents a break because they were babysitting for most of the weekend. But we're like, that something about that whole making this real, and even this is even related to Jonathan's talk about the disappointment aspect. The realness of a community can almost be measured by the inconvenience of it. There are parts of doing it that way as a family that are inconvenient. Like there are things that sometimes, I see things a certain way. Margaret will see things a different way. Sometimes we'll want to be in the same group, different groups. And then having kids just adds a whole nother level of inconvenience and hilarity. But yeah, that's something that we tried to do intentionally. And that's something that we want to try to continue doing with the estuary groups that we start and participate in, is to try to, I don't know if that means making it a family thing, but trying to include that more in the conversation. And I've got one other thing that I want to say too, but what do you think about that?
I think, well, that's very true. The more you pay, the more it's worth. And when you're there with your whole family, it is the more you pay. And, childcare came up and has come up repeatedly. As a pastor, I know something about what it takes to host whole families, because churches do this regularly. And that has gotten, even more complex in the last 20 years with respect to liability, and people, when people are looking out for themselves, it's one thing, but when people are looking out for their spouses and their children, you have whole new levels of dynamics. And so I think as, let's say, other groups come online and start doing these, I wouldn't be surprised if we have some hardy groups out there that decide they want to do a conference that is family friendly and then take on those challenges. You would really have to think about setting, in terms of you'd need play structures, you'd need nursing rooms, you'd need nap rooms, you need supervision so that parents can have a degree of, so there are lots of levels to that, but I think I'd love to see some people step up to that challenge.
Yeah, it helps to have the emergent property, right? And so you don't have to be in charge of that. Have someone else take it. Yep. Which brings me to the other thing that I really wanted to highlight. And Jacob actually asked a question over the weekend that wasn't discussed in the Discord comments, but I wanted to bring attention to. I see this as like a spectrum of like thinky talky on one side. You've got the speakers, you got the scientist and the artist, right? And then on the other side is more like the doers, maybe. And Paul, I see you as kind of like being in the middle. You're like an interpreter. I hesitate to say like an intermediary, like a priest, but like
no, that's exactly what I am, and the role that I play in this. You're exactly right.
Yeah, and then down on the doer side, like the criticality that I think hasn't been highlighted enough of what John Van Donk, what you're doing, and then I put Grim Grizz in that category as well. Like you're the ones, along with Paul, who are closer to, again, the real people. Like, not that other people are fake, but the people down who might not necessarily have an opportunity to be involved in this, who need the help, whose stories need to be told, who need to be highlighted, all of that, and making real events like this a real thing. Like, I see all of you as being the critical part of giving legs to, whatever Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Pajot, and whoever else started. And I think
and
that
Catherine.
is, and yeah, all of you. Yeah, Catherine too. Sorry, I didn't mean to exclude you. But everybody down on that level, I just wanted to highlight the criticality of that, and thank you all for doing that. But I think that is more of what is needed too, and it's just not anything that everybody else isn't already saying too. But I was really gratified to hear people saying at the conference, "Oh, I'm inspired now that I've experienced this, that I might actually be able to go and start something in my local community, and hopefully, have some kind of a hierarchy where we've got lots and lots of connected communities, and they're all in contact with each other as you go up." But yeah, I had a great time, and thank you all for putting it on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Corey.
Good to have you, Corey.
Cassidy, I'm going to bring Paul into the room next. I'm going to bring you in after. So, Paul.
I'm on.
you are on, Paul.
Grizz harassed me on Twitter into jumping on here, so how could I?
Well, good. So, okay. So, what did this conference mean to you? What are your takeaways from it?
It was good meeting a lot of people, and Paul, you've been a big influence in my life over however the last handful of years, and trying to take this online stuff and make it real and give it body is important. And I, as an Orthodox Christian, trying to live an embodied life and not be all about ideas, bring some earth into it and not just stay in heaven, let's say, is important to me, and something I'm trying to do. And just starting the trip off in Palm Springs, going to Joshua Tree, you mentioning me during that talk, it was all very surreal. Meeting Jonathan Pajot in person, one of the photos I took of him, he put in a Symbolic World newsletter, and it was just like, it was a little, the whole thing was a little overwhelming, and I might say I was just trying to follow God and walk in faith and see what happened.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Paul, and thank you for coming. It was a pleasure to meet you, and you were there for paintball, and and you took a bunch of those pictures that you took and offered up to the Discord. So, and well taken pictures were really super helpful to be part of it and to leave a record. So, really appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, Miss Cassidy,
How's married life?
Oh, we can't hear you. You have that big old mic and we can't hear you.
I muted myself. I'm so sorry.
Now, Cassidy,
Hello.
who didn't go to the conference, but she's got good reason. She's all the way over there in Europe.
I probably would have come if I didn't live in Europe, but alas, life has changed.
But Cassidy is one of our organizers, especially in Europe, putting together another event now in October. So what do you have to offer? Why did you want to come on the stream?
Well, I haven't gotten to watch the whole stream. I actually had a recording like in between, so I caught pieces of it, and I'll probably go back and watch. But I just wanted to say I'm just so happy and grateful to see the events going on, and I've put some work in doing that. We're doing it again, and I've always had a passion to see it get off the internet and find ways to be available in person, and events like this always made the most sense for me to do that. So it's just lovely and encouraging to see. We obviously had the festival in Germany last year, and we got to see that, and it's been beautiful to see the little fruits that are coming from it, and getting to do another one again in October. Hearing what you guys did and seeing what you did, it only inspires us to do other things. And so I'm just very grateful, because it takes a lot of work to do those things. And I think the spirit that you guys are going about it is something that we're trying to do as well, as we create events where it's not just about knowledge coming into our brain and meeting cool speakers that we see on the internet. It's like living life and grounding it in real human experiences, and hopefully supporting local estuary, so that it's not, oh, we do this one event and it's over. It's like, no, well, a lot of you are in that area. Keep it going, find ways to create that community, and get the support that we've gotten on the Discord, but is not as sustainable as if you can ground it with people you can live life with.
Yeah. Want to say anything about the October event?
We've got the next European festival, as long as no one comes and swoops under us, but October 27th through 29th. I can't say too much more about that, but more information is coming. And I can probably say that Paul will be there. So we're excited to have him back. But we've got a couple other fun lineup of speakers that we're really excited for. And I'm just excited to help have another year to support the German estuary that Matthias has been so good at, forming and keeping up. And it'll be fun to see that happen again, and see what the second round has in store for us.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Cassidy.
Yeah.
This one was great.
Thank you.
Michael was all over this event. You're muted, Michael, just so you know. You were all over this event. I met Michael at the campground. I ate lunch with Michael a few times, played paintball with Michael. You were everywhere, Michael. So
Yeah.
what are your enduring memories? What sort of came up for you?
Well, what stood out to me, and this happened in a lot of the conversations that I had throughout with a lot of folks, was the same pattern that I found myself experiencing at, I guess you might say, something like the mentorship of your work and Peugeot's work, which was not seeing this stuff, what we're on with YouTube or these communities or these conversations. It's not a destination, right? It's part of a journey, right? Like Peterson might help you get to the desert, or maybe you got to the desert and that's how you found Peterson. But when you're finding home, and I found this to be true on my
on my journey was being able to handle disappointment, right? Because I remember it was the same disappointment that had me walk away, but I couldn't let go of the resentment of the disappointments that I would find. So it's not just encounter that disappointment, but encounter it with little deaths. And when you can participate in that, right? Or at least in my experience, the more that I took those challenges of those little disappointments, including being the disappointment to others, and seeing myself in them, then I'm very grateful, to have shown up to this event. And I remember sitting there listening to some of the talks and missing home, because I was fortunate enough to find one over the last few years on this journey. And I really appreciate that the conversations throughout the talks otherwise continue to point people on stop listening to this in some sense, go find a home, go participate. And so thank you very much for all that you do, all of you.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Ken, there you are.
How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Good to see you all.
Good to see you. I have to say that one of the big highlights for me, John Van Donk provided me with a Buick LeSabre that I was driving around, and I got to drive Ken and his brother and his brother-in-law back and forth to the event a number of times. And I want to have these guys on my channel because we lost him. Oh, Ken, come back. Because Ken and they have quite a story, the whole family. And so again, what a conference like this sort of affords is now I not only, I did a talk with Ken on his channel. You see Ken, he's pulling in Schindler, he's got John Vervaeke on, he's doing all this stuff and climbing Mount Sophia, but getting to know Ken, his brother, his brother-in-law, their family story, it's so rich, so rich. So,
well, thank you, Paul. It was really, it was lovely to get to spend that much time with you. I really enjoyed it. So, and thank you for the rides. You saved me a lot of money on Uber.
Well, thank John. I never paid John Van Donk for the gas, so we were riding on John's. We're riding on John's dime.
Send me your Venmo, John.
You should talk a little bit about now. I got an audio recording of that talk with you and Sevilla and Gary and John, and so I'm planning on posting that because that was sort of an ad hoc impromptu breakout session that got organized.
Thanks,
by
Jacob.
you know who, organized by you know who.
By Jacob, of course. This is a force of nature, Jacob Federecci. But yeah, so that was, so I look forward to posting that. So Ken, you came in here, you've participated quite a bit in this little corner, starting your own channel, getting speakers on. So what were your thoughts from the conference?
Yeah. So first of all, in terms of that breakout session, that was really lovely. You might notice I'm at work currently, so I'm taking a little time out of my work day to jump in here because practicing medicine and the intersection of modern Western medicine with the meaning crisis is something that is very alive for me and very important. I thought that we barely got started on a discussion of that in that panel, but it was quite lovely, and especially some of the things that Sevilla shared about how she's doing work and kind of her perspective on treating mental health disorders, particularly. It struck me pretty deeply in that panel. So that was lovely. The conference overall, as anyone who knows me will know, John Vervaeke is a really significant part of my life. So it was lovely to actually get to meet him in person, although I've spoken with him many times on Zoom. And that was part of why I wanted to jump on, because one of the things that was interesting to me and actually really surprised me about this conference was how many people I heard saying something along the lines of John Vervaeke's work seems to be very cerebral without a lot of embodiment. And that was a bit confusing to me, because my experience has been that while there is a great deal of conceptual and cerebral work in the corpus of John Vervaeke, the emphasis that I've always felt deeply from John is on embodiment and on the practices to bring it down. So I don't know that I necessarily have a lot to say about it, particularly other than if that's been your impression, I would recommend taking a little bit closer look at some of John's work around the ecology of practices, especially around the After Socrates series, because I think that he does a lot more to enhance an embodied practice than it seemed like a lot of people seem to understand. So more just from an informational point of view, I'm presenting that.
Okay. I think part of the struggle that John is providing a vocabulary. I think it's tough for people to understand dialogos, dialogue, inventio, invention, parasitic processing. There's a lot of P's. This is really a part of the on-ramp challenge that we talk about quite regularly.
Yeah. All of that's true, and it takes no small amount of time and, at least in my experience, intentional effort to transition your vocabulary. I found it to be very useful to do that personally, but I also I think that while all of that is deeply meaningful and helpful, there are aspects of the on-ramp in John's work that maybe I just felt like maybe needs to be highlighted. But to back out of that particular point to be made, for me, just the engagement with people in real life, it was just really lovely. And I did this a couple of times, but once again, John Van Donk, not only thank you for putting on the conference, but I felt that the spirit of the conference really turned, kind of circled around a center point that was your talk on Friday. I felt like that was just so incredibly important to personalizing the sense of a quest for home. That was deeply important, deeply impactful, at least for me personally and for folks that I talked to. So I suppose that's my feedback.
All right. Thank you, Ken.
Appreciate it.
I'm going to bring in a page here because, Catherine, I want you to talk a little bit about your article. So if you just search Catherine Wilson Symbolic World, you'll get her list of articles. And actually, we talked about this at that dinner. The spirit of Christmas and hosting. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's actually been key in terms of understanding what these conferences and what you've brought to these conferences.
Yeah, I appreciate the chance. So in that article, I was thinking about Christmas, and one of the things that struck me is that the spirit of Christmas and the spirit of Christ are not the same thing. We often think, oh, it's Christmas, we're celebrating the birth of Christ for Christians. And that's true. But that spirit of celebration is itself a thing. And there's this very, as the body of Christ, we are meant to be sort of like Mary. We are the host, we are the receptacle, we are the frame in which the Spirit of God can come to rest and can be a body and a host for the Spirit of Christ. And as the church, as the bride of Christ, as individuals and collectively from the spiritual conception, our role is to host that Spirit, not to bring it forward ourselves. Now, there is a role where you are being Christ in the world. It's more of a messianic, personal enactment of Christ himself. But the feminine version of that, which is the call as the body of Christ, is to create create and participate in the patterns and the rhythms that bring that spirit into being. In the article, one of the things that I talk about is the way that you have these rituals and patterns in Christmas that allow us to host and celebrate a spirit that is welcoming the spirit of Christ. And so one of the first ones is you have a herald. So kind of like John the Baptist, we have Santa Claus, and he says, Jesus is, Christmas is coming. The spirit of giving is here. We use him sort of to herald the fact that the Christmas day will be there. We're going to give presents to one another. We're going to be receiving those presents. So even just the fact that you're thinking that it will come is preparing you to have a spirit of receptivity. And that spirit of receptivity is a huge part of Christmas. We all have, well, maybe not all of us, many of us have that relative who loves to give presents but doesn't want any for themselves. They have a very hard time receiving things. They might host a party, but they don't really want to share about how they're doing. And so that actually could limit the joy of other people when that person struggles to receive from other people. We hang stockings. That's another way to set up this feeling of I'm preparing myself to receive from Santa Claus, but it's a receptive stance that you're taking on. Other things that you do in the space is, traditionally you put out cookies and milk, sort of like an offering, a conscious that will happen. But for many of us, what's important Christmas morning is not whatever is in the packages. Like, that's nice, and we like that, and little kids get excited about that. But Christmas morning is exciting because you're in a warm room. Traditionally there's the fireplace there as well. We've talked about camping and fires and how that kind of has its own nature. But you have a warm room and people are hosted in. Most traditional stories about Christmas, like A Christmas Carol or something, in the final climax, you'll see the old uncle or the stranger on the street has been brought into the Christmas dinner party. And so there's this spirit of we're bringing people in from the outside, and it really is the openness to conversation, the willingness to receive from other people, the willingness to give so that others can receive, and this interplay back and forth that is what hosts in Christmas the reception of the Spirit of Christ. And so that very much has been a part of my thinking with these conferences, and what I'm hoping will move forward with this spirit that I'm hoping is being instantiated. It's very much a spirit of hosting and gratitude and joy in the other, and a willingness to take a role in the give and take, which requires being open, and it requires play, like real play. But it is also understood like Christmas is once a year, right? You can't have every day be Christmas. There's things that have to be done. But if you can have that moment where you host the Spirit of Christ, and people can take that as literally as they want to, but you host the Spirit, it puts you in a different mode from being a thing in the world. And so, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, Paul and John.
Well, I think you're right in that we make space for this. I talked a little bit on the conference about sort of the mind of modernity, or a machine mind even. And this conference was very much not that way. There's no way to control what goes on with an estuary format. By design, the people coming into the room, that spirit, and any estuary meeting, you sense a spirit from the gathering of the people. There is a spirit of the conversation, or an angel of the conversation, as Peugeot has said in other places. And what we did very much was look to create a space for a spirit but we could not make it happen. We tried to very much get out of the way of it happening, but there's a lot of risk in there. And, you know, if it's remarkable how quickly certain bad actors can destroy a spirit in a place. And we haven't had that for the most part in either of our events. So I think so when Catherine at the lunch on Sunday, when you said this to me, I thought, yeah, that's super helpful in terms of what we're trying to do here. We're creating a space, and that's now become a cliche, but for Christmas, for creating a space for Christmas, that's all we do, and we welcome the Christ child. But we can't deliver the Christ child. It's a gift. And in fact, especially some of the early talks, Peugeot emphasized that a lot in his talk about the giftedness of all of this. And even though we didn't talk about faith directly often in the conference, I often thought about that sort of as the talks were, that this is all a step of faith. And right away, when you announced the Thunder Bay conference, how many people are going to come? We have no idea. Thunder Bay isn't the easiest place in the world to get to. And we did this, John Van Donk. How many people can we expect at this place? I have no idea. John Van Donk and I have done things that almost no one has shown up to. So we've had that. And we've had things where more than we expected showed up. So this entire effort is sort of a decking the halls, lighting the candles, setting out the milk and cookies, and praying that the Spirit comes and that it's a good Spirit.
Yeah, I think that you're also dancing around a feature or alluding to a feature of the no agenda. To be a hostess, I'm part of a dinner group in my community, and we have dinner every other week, and we usually invite a guest. And we never quite know what the guest is going to bring to the table, because we don't tell that guest, well, you're expected to say this or that, or you can expect us to say this or that. There's never an agenda for the topics that get discussed. And so it's always a pretty free flowing thing. But that opens a space that creates a thing where people can sort of find their own voice in a way, and find their own need. And the trouble with a lot of what's going on in the world and in life is that it is very agenda driven. I mean, a lot of what happens in churches is agenda driven. What happens in politics is agenda driven. What happens in the media is agenda driven. So to have a space where there is no overt agenda, and where people simply gather to enjoy milk and cookies, as you put it, Catherine, or some other kind of food, I think there is something rather liberating about that, and perhaps in and of itself is a feature of new life.
You came in for a reason, Grizz. You don't just pop in just for fun. I know you.
With regards to agenda, I wanted to make sure to highlight a couple of people that were at the camp. Don and Eddie, and their agenda was quiet service. And there's people like I'm shiny and Mo is shiny, and there's lots of shiny people, but like Catherine's talking about this creation, making a space. There's people in that space with the agenda of quiet servitude. And I wanted to highlight those people because they're hard to remember to shout out, because they're doing the quiet servitude thing. And I'm sure all of you have examples, but for me, it's Don and Eddie. Thanks, guys. And thanks to everybody again.
I appreciate Chris saying that. I think another thing, so the other article I wrote, one of the other ones, I contrast this hosting of a good spirit, hosting of the Spirit of God, with the transactional spirit, like you're talking about, John, where I think when you come to something, you say, I'll make a sacrifice to you if I can get something in return. I will come and perform these things or do whatever I need to, and you'll give me what I want. You know, in the article, I play with the story of Rumpelstiltskin. But I think very important in what we're doing here is not making money off of it, not trying to promote a brand and get followers. Not as soon as you say, okay, I'll do this so I can get this other thing, then, like you say, John, now there's an agenda. And I think that just it's the absolute antithesis to creating a space to host a spirit which you can't control and you hope will descend upon the group. And you basically have two modes you can be in. You can either try to get a spirit to serve you, or you can create a space to potentially host one. And there isn't another mode, I don't think.
Hearing you say that kind of convicts me once again, because anytime you hear me say one trick pony, you know that the next word out of my mouth is going to be estuary. and so I feel a little bit convicted in that I definitely did see this conference as a vehicle to promote estuary, but right now I mean, if I could articulate it this way, for future conferences, I would rather that the conference organizers invite an adequate number of estuary leaders to the conference than invite me. In other words, I think I've said everything that needs to be said about estuary in every context that it needs to be said. I should just shut up and be retired.
Well, John, I do want to say, I think that you don't need to be too convicted, because what I see from you is wanting more people to host the spirit. And so that's not the same as saying I'm trying to get estuary going so I can retire more comfortably with more condos in Hawaii. Like,
no, that's not what I'm saying at all. No. What I am saying, though, is that if you're going to model hospitality, it shouldn't be some overweight guy in front on the stage talking about estuary protocol and estuary principles and why do estuary and promote the estuary project. That shouldn't be it. But what you do want to do is you want to get as many trained leaders who can host the space, who can navigate the interruptions, who can preserve and protect the space where people can find their own voice. You only need one of those in a group, and you need only 20 in a group of 200. And so, these kind of people are now available and are trained. All you have to do is send a bunch of complimentary tickets to the leaders, and they will help you preserve the spirit in the small groups, insofar as that is necessary.
Okay. And it should be known that there has been absolutely no effort by John and myself to trademark estuary or to monetize it. It is sometimes people are like, well, it's that estuary thing. It's like, this is a little trick we play. Anybody can play it. They can use it for any reason. It's not even in Creative Commons. Just it's out there. Just use it if you find it helpful.
There is no estuary ink.
Nope, no estuary ink. So, all right, we have arrived at the 2-hour mark plus a little bit. Any closing thoughts or comments that either of you would like to leave with the group? Any final words?
Well, I want to thank John for inviting me to participate in all of this. You did an excellent job. It was a joy to be a part of it. It really is, like Chad was alluding to, when you get to have a role where you can participate and serve other people in it, you're able to find yourself and your place in the community in ways that you don't get to as easily otherwise. And so I appreciate that. And I really enjoyed meeting all the people at the conference, all the conversations. It was wonderful. So thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
thank
for
you,
saying
Catherine,
that.
for coming down and being willing to come.
Yeah.
That was a really big deal. So I'm glad you could get in. And thank you, John, for picking up the ball. And thanks to Cross Point Church. Their staff was amazing. They
Chad
really
asked a question earlier in the comment section about what was the feedback from Crosspoint. I haven't had much of an opportunity to ascertain that, but maybe we can do some reflections with the people from Crosspoint and have a conversation with them on your channel. That would be cool.
That'd be great.
So,
I'd be
yeah.
happy to host that. So, all right. Any last words from you, Vendonk?
No.
Eat more herring. There you go.
Eat more herring. And sing the Frisian anthem.
Sing the Frisian anthem. Gosh. All right. Thank you all. Thank you for your time and attention. And on to the next thing.
I have one more question.
Oh.
Who has a picture of all the voicers?
Yeah, I don't know. For CRC Voices, we did take a picture. I don't know who took that picture, but any CRC voicers out there that have that picture, we've got to post that on CRC Voices. It's been requested. So, all right. Thank you all.
Thanks, Paul. Have a good day.